Greetings to all the learners. Welcome to CEC lecture. The topic that we shall analyze is World Science Day for Peace and Development. In this lecture, we shall elaborate on the importance of World Science Day for Peace and Development. In this lecture, we shall present an analysis of World Science Report of 2010, 2015 and 2021 to explain issues concerning role of science with respect to peace and development of national and international relations. To raise new questions, new possibilities and to regard old problems from a new angle requires creative imagination and marks real advance in science. So said Albert Einstein. Science does not know its debt to imagination. So said Ralph Waldo Emerson. Now, with these two very powerful quotes, we'll now begin our discussion that when we look at World Science Day for Peace and Development, it is a very important international day that highlights the significant role science has to play in society. It is celebrated every year on 10th November. This day highlights the need to engage with the wider public in debates on emerging scientific issues. The World Science Day for Peace and Development was proclaimed by the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization UNESCO in 2001. The significance of this day is that it highlights the important role we all know science has in society. This day puts forward the need to engage with wider public in debates on emerging scientific issues. It also underlines the importance and relevance of science with respect to daily living. Now, as we are trying to understand the significance of this World Science Day for Peace and Development celebrated every year on 10th November, and this day was proclaimed by UNESCO in 2001. Now, in order to elaborate further on this day, we take reference to UNESCO Science Report. Now, this is a very important global document. Let us understand what is that. The UNESCO Science Report, dear learners, is a global monitoring report. It is published regularly by United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. It was launched in 1993 under the name of World Science Report. It is published every 5 years in the month of November. And since 1993, if we look at the number of reports, there have been 6 reports. If we take reference to UNESCO archives and digital library, the digital inputs, there are 6 reports that have been published. The series monitors the evolution of the support system for science, technology, innovation worldwide over the time period. Now, the recent report, as you all know that if the first report comes up in the year 1993 and it is published every 5 years. But when we look at the year of 2020, the recent report, which was due for release in November 2020, it got postponed due to the COVID pandemic. UNESCO Science Report, when we look at the 2010 report, the report talks about the current status of science around the world. Once again, taking input from the digital references from UNESCO and various other sources, this report talks about disparity in development levels from one country and region to another, and that it remains striking. Further, the report points out that in 2007, per capita income in United States of America was estimated to be 30 times higher on average than in sub-Saharan Africa. Further, the report points out that differences in economic growth rates have been compounded over the years, leading to divergence a lot. Over the past 150 years, income levels between rich and poor countries too have increased. The UNESCO Science Report 2010, the current status of science around the world, points out that Europe, Japan and United States, the triad, may still dominate research and development, but they are increasingly being challenged by emerging economies. This report depicted an increasingly competitive environment, one in which the flow of information and knowledge, personnel and investment has become a two-way traffic. The report also points out way back in 2010 that both China and India, for example, are using their newfound economic might to invest in high-tech companies in Europe and elsewhere to acquire technological expertise overnight. So, this report, tries to also tells us that other large economies are also spending more on research than ever before. Amongst them are Brazil, Mexico, South Africa and Turkey. The UNESCO Science Report 2010, the current status of science around the world, points out that even countries with lesser scientific capacity are finding that they can acquire, adopt and sometimes even transform existing technology and therefore leapfrog over certain costly investments such as infrastructure like landlines for telephones amongst others. Technological progress, as the report points out, is allowing these countries to promote more knowledge and participate more actively than before in international networks and research partnerships with countries in both North and the South. The trend is fostering a democratization of the science network. In turn, science diplomacy is becoming a key instrument of peace building and sustainable development in international relations. Further, the UNESCO Science Report 2010 proposes a world tour of the status of science today that should enable science watchers and everywhere to decipher the trends that are shaping our rapidly changing world. It points towards the increase in stock of world knowledge as epitomized by digital technologies, discoveries in life sciences or nanotechnologies, creating fantastic opportunities for emerging nations to attain higher levels of social welfare and productivity. In this sense, the old nation of technological gap, as the report points out, can today then be considered as a blessing for those economies possessing sufficient absorptive capacity and efficiency to enable them to exploit their advantage of relative backwardness. The report further points out that there is a growing recognition that in the system congruence between various knowledge components of innovation system that counts when it comes to devising a successful growth strategy. Now, the inputs that UNESCO Science Report 2010 points out, the UNESCO Science Report 2015 adds more to that. The UNESCO Science Report 2015 with the title Towards 2030 points out that although sustainable development goals have been adopted by governments, it is evident that they will be reached only if stakeholders take ownership of them. And here the reports very importantly points out that the scientific community is already on board. The report points out that as we see that from UNESCO Science Report Towards 2030, the focus of scientific discovery has shifted towards problem solving in order to tackle pressing developmental challenges. The UNESCO Science Report 2015 Towards 2030 also points out that shift in research priorities is evident in the amount of research funds currently being allocated to applied science. In parallel, both governments and businesses are increasingly investing in the development of green technologies, green cities. Further, UNESCO Science Report 2015 titled Towards 2030 points out that at a time we should not forget that basic science and applied science are two subsides of the same coin, as recalled by the Scientific Advisory Board to the Secretary General of the United Nations. They are interconnected and interdependent, thus complement each in providing innovative solutions to the challenges humanity faces on the pathway to sustainable development. The UNESCO Science Report 2015 Towards 2030 points out that an adequate investment in both basic and applied research and development is very essential, very critical to reaching the goals of Agenda 2030. The report points out countries are also becoming increasingly aware of the value of their natural capital, as illustrated by the recommendation of the Gabon Declaration on Sustainability 2012 for African countries to integrate the value of natural capital into national accounting and corporate planning. Amongst high-income economies, namely European Union, Republic of Korea, Japan, amongst others, a firm commitment, as the report points out, to sustainable development is often coupled with the desire to maintain competitiveness in global markets that are increasingly leaning towards green technologies. Once again, this report, which was first published in France, published in 2015 by United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, this report indeed gives to us new developments at how today, with respect to the financing component of science or with respect to the how countries are moving towards sustainability as a goal, and how that involvement of various stakeholders is needed, and when we look at the bigger aim, which is the reaching the goals of Agenda 2030. The UNESCO Science Report, the contemporary report in 2021, we all know that the report which was supposed to be there in November 2020 could not be there because of the pandemic. So the report UNESCO Science Report 2021 was there, and its report subtitle is very essential to comprehend the race against time for smarter development. This tells us that yes, time is very precious. We don't have time, and there is a need for smarter development. Some of the very important highlights of this report that during the period from 2014 to 2018, spending on science worldwide has increased by nearly 20%. Further, the report points out that number of scientists, when we look at some important data coming from the report, number of scientists rose from 13.7%, a trend that was further boosted by COVID-19 pandemic. And two countries, United States and China, accounted for nearly 2/3 of this increase, or roughly 63%. The UNESCO Science Report 2021 pointed out that 4 out of 5 countries fall far behind, investing less than 1% of their GDP in scientific research. Further, that how fields of artificial intelligence, robotics have become completely dynamic. The report points out that research has surged in lower middle income countries, rising from just under 13% in 2015 to more than 25% in 2019. The UNESCO Science Report 2021 underlines critical areas like carbon capture and storage. They have received less investment. Further, open access to research remains a challenge, as more than 70% of publications, if we see, they remain largely inaccessible to majority of researchers. The report also points out that is only 1/3 of researchers are women, and account for only 20, and the women force, they account for only 22% of the workforce in artificial intelligence. Once again, these all inputs are there from UNESCO Science Report 2021, published on 14 June 2021. Now, this report gives us very important insights towards gender. We all know that today gender, that is, we're looking into concerns of marginalization of women, which was earlier not essential in global governance issues. In the post-Cold War era, the inability of the realist perspective, the mainstream perspective, to comprehend the end of the Cold War definitely leads the discipline towards a reflectivist turn. And here within this reflectivist turn, the gender issues, the need to look at the human agency, the need to look at marginalization of women becomes essential for global governance also. Today, as we all know, any summit on global governance factors into account the gender concerns. Gender equity continues to be a concern globally. Women account for only 1/3 of researchers around the world, as the very important report, UNESCO Science Report 2021 updates us, and that only 1/4 of tertiary graduates in engineering, but that only 40% in computer sciences. Women participation, if we look at with respect to work in the newly emerging field of artificial intelligence, is just only over 20%. However, greater equality is observed in life science resource. The pandemic has exacerbated great gender inequality in a range of areas, including job insecurity, employment, promotion prospects, balancing work life from home. So therefore, this report points out that at a time we have to reflect on global governance with a holistic approach. There is a need to have an inclusive insight also when we debate science and when we look at the women concern. Further, as we were deliberating on all the important inputs from UNESCO Science Report, there is a sense that today science is very essential for nation development. Science is a very important factor with reference to peace and development. Taking reference to a very important article by Professor Ruthela Peawana, Role of Science and Technology in Nation Building, that is, development of scientific knowledge and discoveries and the application of new technologies are indeed very useful for nation building. We all have seen in the past that in various countries, scientific inventions have definitely paved way for betterment of humanity. We all have seen in the past that how invention of scientific knowledge and various kinds of related discoveries have paved way for new job opportunities to make lives of people better, amongst others. Science and technologies have caused social changes also in our lives, as the article points out. Further, as the article by Professor Ruthela points out, that is, it has resulted in definition of our modern society. One of the defining criteria of present day contemporary modern society is the rampant pervasive use and influence of science as well as technology. Nation building therefore will be impossible without any social and economic development, and therefore no doubt today science and technology are playing a very important role with respect to improvement of the society. Science and technology have greatly changed many aspects of our lives, like education, like healthcare, and indeed all this is advantageous with respect to sustainable social development. Now, dear learners, as we are deliberating on World Science Day for Peace and Development, looking at how this day it tries to put forward the significant role of science. This day depicts to us that there is a need to understand the role of science in society, and above all look at the aspect of public engagement in debates concerning scientific issues. Now, today science has become an important variable with respect to national interest of various nation states. Today when they are coming forward for various international and global summits, they try to address issues concerning artificial intelligence, robotic, Internet of Things, and in all these areas, science and discoveries are playing an important role. Today, technology is an important dimension of power. It has an important impact with respect to daily lives of people also. So, in this, once again, one cannot ignore the relevance of science in daily living. However, then there is a need to address the issue, that is the gap concerning use of science between the developed world and the underdeveloped world. The gap concerning the impact, the percolation of scientific benefits between the rural area and the urban areas. One has to bridge this gap with respect to developed and the developing world, with respect to rural and the urban, in order to ensure that science and its benefits reach out to every section of the society, in order to ensure that the creative aspects, the real advances in science, that is, it is there for the advantage of what Mahatma Gandhi ji visioned, the benefit of the last person in the last line, as symbolized in Mahatma Gandhi ji's talisman. So, there is a need to decentralize benefits of science. There is a need to connect the benefits, the advantages of science to the common people. No doubt, science is playing a very important role with respect to world peace and global development. Science has acquired a very unique place with respect to development at national and international realms. So, there is a need to take the benefits of science with respect to peace and development, taking inputs from all the dynamism, from all the changes that keep on happening, to ensure that the rural areas are benefit, to ensure that the gap between rich and poor countries with respect to scientific research and advancements is also catered to. Dear learners, we hope the lecture on World Science Day for Peace and Development presented to you significant inputs and insight. We look forward to positive, encouraging feedback from you all. Thank you very much.